All right, let's just jump right into this explainer. For 60 years, the events of November 22nd, 1963 have sparked some of the most intense debates out there. Today, we're taking a completely objective look at the source material to visually deconstruct the timeline, the missing evidence, and the, quite frankly, bizarre geographical choices that make this whole case so baffling. And hey, we're not here to take sides. We're just laying out exactly what the records and the data show us.
Based on that source material, the absolute central mystery we're trying to untangle is this. How did one solitary figure allegedly outsmart the top intelligence agencies on the entire planet? I mean, was it a carefully orchestrated plot with a ton of moving parts, or did a single guy really just slip past the most elite security network in the world? Keep that core question in the back of your mind as we go through this. Okay, Section 1, the Dallas assassination. You really have to picture the multi-layered defensive shield that was supposed to be wrapped around the president that day. We're talking Secret Service agents practically on top of him, a massive local police escort, and advanced FBI surveillance that had mapped out the entire route days ahead of time. But despite all of that security muscle, John F. Kennedy was fatally shot right there in Dealey Plaza. And that immediately kicked off a frantic manhunt that completely overwhelmed those exact same top-tier agencies.
Moving on to Section 2, planning the fatal route. Now, what's really fascinating here is how the sheer choice of venue completely changed the president's vulnerability. There were originally two options for the speech. The White House was heavily pushing for the Women's Building, but Texas Governor John Connally, who, remember, actually ended up in the car with Kennedy and was injured himself, well, he really preferred the Trade Mart. Why? Because it had a nicer interior banquet hall. The official records actually show this whole back and forth, with the Trade Mart only getting the green light just 8 days before the event. And crucially, that final choice was kept entirely unpublicized.
And this brings us to our first major red flag. The motorcade completely threw out the standard, much safer highway protocol. Normally, the playbook says to use a highway bypass with barely any turns to get to the Trade Mart. But instead, they went with a slow, winding route right through the heart of downtown Dallas, a route that took them directly, and I mean literally right beside, the schoolbook depository. The source notes this change was reportedly at the president's own request because he wanted to be closer to the crowds, but man, it really set the stage for what happened next. You really need to grasp this geographical reality because it's a huge takeaway. If they had gone with the Women's Building, like the White House wanted, the motorcade would have traveled east. First Lady Jackie Kennedy, who always sat on the president's left, would have been seated directly in the line of fire. She literally would have been blocking the president from the book depository windows. So choosing the Trade Mart was the absolute prerequisite for anyone in that specific building to even have a clear shot at John F. Kennedy. All right, let's look at Section 3, a suspect's suspicious timeline. Walk through this timeline with me for a second because critics always point out the timing here. Was it really just a coincidence that Lee Harvey Oswald got a job overlooking the exact fatal route a mere 39 days before the assassination? Let's break it down. In September, a guy named Wesley Frazier gets a job at the depository. Around mid-October, Frazier's neighbor calls looking for work, and literally the next day, October 16th, that neighbor, Oswald, is hired. Keep in mind, the venue and the route were absolutely not public knowledge yet. Oswald starts carpooling with Frazier every single week. But then, on Thursday, November 21st, he suddenly breaks his usual weekend routine.
Breaking that routine the night before is key, because on the morning of the assassination, Oswald shows up with a really suspicious package. He's carrying this long paper bag, and he explicitly tells Frazier that it just contains curtain rods for his room. The source material highlights this incredibly specific visual detail as the exact moment all the physical pieces of this tragedy were finally moved into place.
Which brings us to Section 4, the shooting and aftermath. At exactly 12 p.m., Oswald's coworkers head down to the first floor for lunch, leaving him totally alone up on the 6th floor. Exactly 30 minutes later, at 12:30, the presidential motorcade takes that fateful left turn right in front of the depository. According to the source, the area suddenly just echoes with gunfire. One shot hits the president's neck, another strikes his head. In just minutes, the whole scene devolves into absolute chaos. A police officer actually rushes up to the 6th floor right after someone spots a shooter in the window. But by the time he kicks open the door, the room is completely empty. Now, the timeline of his escape? This is exactly where the narrative gets super messy. Oswald's actions right after the shooting present this wild contradiction. On one hand, he supposedly just pulled off a mastermind-level assassination flawlessly. slipping out of a locked-down building without anyone noticing. But then, almost immediately, he starts making these panicked, highly visible mistakes. He runs home, changes his clothes, grabs a pistol, shoots a patrolling police officer right out on the street, and then haphazardly ducks into a local movie theater where he's quickly cornered and arrested. It's this bizarre mix of extreme competence followed by total chaotic blundering. Okay, Section 5, Missing Evidence and Mysteries. Get ready, because this is one of the most mind-blowing facts from the source material. Lee Harvey Oswald is taken into custody, right? He is aggressively interrogated for 2 full days. We're talking behind closed doors with the local police, the FBI, and the CIA. And yet, there are 0 audio or video recordings of this. None. The total lack of any recorded interrogation means we have absolutely no official, verifiable record of what the most famous suspect in American history actually said to investigators before he suddenly died.
The only thing we do know for sure is what Oswald shouted to reporters out in the hallways. He vehemently denied the charges on live TV, just repeating over and over that he was a patsy. Obviously, that's a defense he never got to argue in front of a judge. On November 24th, while he was being transferred under what was supposed to be an incredibly heavy police guard, a civilian walked right up and shot him. The truth, whatever it actually was, essentially died right there with him, ironically in the exact same hospital where they had taken Kennedy. When you compile all these missing pieces and procedural breaches onto one slide, you really start to see why the official narrative leaves so many investigators totally unsatisfied. I mean, multiple witnesses flat out disputed the physical description of the guy in the window. The FBI was actively monitoring Oswald, a former U.S. Marine, by the way, yet they completely concealed his background from the Secret Service when they were planning the route. At the actual crime scene, 3 bullet shells were reportedly moved and then put back before any official photos were taken. Oh, and to top it all off, the initial police videos of that 6th floor firing location just vanished. But honestly, maybe the most chilling visual anomaly of the entire explainer is the figure known as the babushka lady. As the source details, she was this unidentified woman wearing a headscarf who shows up in almost all the photographic evidence. While everyone else is literally dropping to the ground in sheer terror, she is just standing there, super calm, incredibly close to the motorcade, recording the whole thing with a camera. She literally held the most critical close-up visual evidence of the entire event. And it is completely baffling, like truly inexplicable, that the top intelligence agencies in the world could never identify or track down a prime witness who was standing right in the line of fire. Despite the massive manhunt, despite the sprawling investigations, and despite her face being clearly visible in tons of photos and films, neither the babusha lady nor her vital footage was ever recovered by the FBI. She just disappeared into history. So we're going to leave you with this final, provocative question to chew on. You've heard the timeline, you've seen the missing records and the geographical coincidences. So how, exactly, did an alleged lone wolf and some unidentified civilian with a camera manage to completely outsmart the combined intelligence of the FBI, the CIA, and the Secret Service? The facts we've laid out in this explainer make one thing very clear. Despite the official conclusions, the events of November 22, 1963, absolutely remain an open file.